Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about, more than a little bit, about what's on my mind. I've told you this before, and I'm going to tell you again. We Jews are a 4,000-year-old people. Been around for 4,000 years. During these 4 millennia, if you open history books, you're going to find that they are filled with pages and pages of challenges to our people's survival. No, not just our physical survival. That's one thing. And yes, our physical survival has been challenged. It was just challenged on October 7th of last year. But also, our cultural and religious existence has been challenged. There were laws by many countries that said we couldn't study Torah anymore. We couldn't do anything. We couldn't go to synagogue. We couldn't. They even burned us. And we have been challenged by our physical survival and our cultural and religious existence through the millennium. Are there any other peoples in the world who have faced endless exiles, perpetual attempted genocides of a physical, cultural, and religious nature and survived? Any other? How many other peoples have faced the destruction of its physical center more than once and still exist? How many other peoples face things like being enslaved in Mitzrayim, the Amalekites, the reason for Purim and Hanukkah, the Crusades, the pogroms, the Shoah, local houses of worship being attacked and burned, October 7th, daily rocket attacks, constant protests against them, world condemnation, victimization, bullying, persecution, torture, harassment, beaten, just because not they, just because we identify as one people with one set of highly developed and well-defined values to make the world just a little bit better than the way we found it. Perhaps a better question should be, why would any rational, thinking, intelligent person want to stay affiliated with a people that nobody else, and I mean nobody else, wants around? What are we, ridiculous, stupid? Are we imbeciles? Regarding the unique case of anti-Semitism, how can anyone explain this baseless hatred? Only when Jews are attacked by terrorists does the world complain when we defend ourselves and attempt to eliminate the cancer. Only us. Everybody else can do it. We're not allowed. When the United States went to war after Pearl Harbor, did the world complain? When the United States reduced ISIS to rubble, did the world complain? When Israel starts to win against those who want to destroy us, the world throws a fit and calls for a ceasefire. Again, I ask, why would anyone want to remain part of a people who historically is assured of facing such horrible treatment? Why? Is it because membership offers us some sort of monetary or material reward? Are we rewarded because we remain Jews? What reward? Is it because we are promised something wonderful after we die? We are not. Do we remain Jews because some force of nature that chains us together against our will? Is some force of nature doing that? No. So what is it? Is it our strong belief in the mitzvot? Not a chance. Most Jews think a mitzvah is a good deed, not a commandment of God. I don't even know how many there are. Is it because we go to a minyan 3 times a day? Yeah, sure. Most Jews do not even care about the high holy days. They don't even own a talit. They certainly don't own tefillin. Is the Torah? Is it the Torah itself? Do you know most Jews by far have never seen the inside of a Torah in real life? They've never been called for an aliyah. Can't be that. Is it an observing Shiva? Huh. Most Jews do not sit for 7 days anymore. And I have to tell you, since COVID, many don't sit at all. They just sit a little while after the funeral for 1 day, maybe 2, at most 3. They don't sit Shiva. Can't be that. How about saying Kaddish every day? Forget it. We know the answer to that one. How about raising their children as Jewish children are supposed to be raised? That's very rare as well. So then what is it? Why did Jews remain Jews in this historically anti-Semitic world? Why do Jews remain Jews when nothing about our Jewish religion seems to matter to most of us? Why do Jews remain Jews in a society where belonging to anything is out of fashion? Nobody's joining anything anymore. Most organizations are shrinking and falling apart. An even bigger question is, with this as a backdrop, why are people who left Judaism, this is amazing, why are they returning? And why are more people than ever, and this is a fact, why are more people than ever converting to Judaism? What, are they all nuts? Well, I just said a lot. Not very encouraging, except for the fact more people want to be Jews. I like that idea, but why? Can I come up with an answer to this? Why have Jews survived and continue to survive? And we're growing as a people. We're not shrinking. How is this explained? Look, we all know that Adam Sandler, Natalie Portman, Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David, Seth Rogen, and more are Jewish. We know that. We know the names. We recognize them. But when we talk about them and other Jews, we think of them as what? As part of our family, of a Jewish people. We're proud to be able to know these people are there. No matter where we come from, even if we are as secular as a tree, deep inside we know we share a common history. We know about most of the holidays and many rituals. For millennia, those were our common ties. For millennia, for thousands of years. After all, there are a lot of different ways to have a family. While we do not need to be biologically related to be family, something amazing happened when DNA testing came along. With it, an interesting question is, could the big, sprawling, diverse Jewish family be more than just a metaphor? Does DNA testing determine identity? Let's get one thing straight and agree on this. DNA can tell us a lot about ourselves. It can and does predict whether we're at risk for certain diseases. It knows our eye color, our hair texture, and our height. We know that. It's in the DNA. It is what makes us who we are on a cellular level, but it is not all we are. Our DNA does not dictate our culture or our values or our faith. It is just a set of genetic markers. Another data point is much more important. For thousands of years, the Jewish people have seen one another as a family with a shared history. Nothing in our DNA can change that. But there is something else. This story, as I started my Devar Torah today, starts 4,000 years ago in the Middle East. And we find out about it in the Tanakh, in our Jewish Bible. It is that tradition that we have continuously passed down through the generations, both on purpose and also without knowing it. It is what it says in our Tanakh that is our foundation of our prayer services, to our holidays, to our culture, to our customs, to our laws, to what flows through our hearts, our lungs, our brains, and perhaps it even somehow has had an influence on our DNA. Even when we were exiled from our homeland for thousands of years, no one really questioned this story because no matter where we were in the world, Jews were considered a tribe unto ourselves. This difference was the basis for a lot of persecution. And I told you about that. Not that I had to. Ask your average medieval peasants why they were running their Jewish neighbors out of town with torches and pitchforks. You'll get the same answer every time. They're Jews. They're not from here. They're not like us. As more and more Jews began to return to our ancestral homeland, Eretz Yisrael, the story began to shift even through today. When the anti-Zionist crowd attacks the basic foundations of Jewish identity, denying that we are Jews and that we have any historical, cultural, and religious links to the land of Israel. They say we don't. The anti-Zionist and the anti-Semitic, which is no different, their narrative is becoming a lot more compelling because the lie that the Jewish people originated somewhere else in the world, maybe Antarctica, who knows? They make up stuff every day. But they're marketing it successfully everywhere. So when scientists discovered that our DNA holds clues to our geographic origins, both the Jews and the anti-Semites started to go deep into genetic research. This means that the question of Jewish genetics is no longer a simple curiosity. It is now another way for anti-Semites to define who is a Jew. Imagine if Hitler, Yamach Shemo, his name should be erased from memory, and his Jew-hating followers had access to DNA results. Imagine how many more people would have been killed. The reality is there is so much more to Jewish and Israeli identity than DNA. However, it is a very useful tool for those who want to weaponize Jewish identity. So what does science say about all this? Well, it confirms the historical, cultural, and religious idea that most of us are related to one another genetically. Most of us can trace our ancestry all the way back to where? No, not the Mississippi. All the way back to the Middle East. Scientists compared the skeletons of DNA of Jews of the 1700s to the DNA of modern Jews, and guess what they found? Almost all of the Ashkenazi Jews are descended from a few hundred Jews who lived in Germany. You think that is a tiny gene pool? It turns out that roughly 40% of Ashkenazi Jews are descended from the same four mothers, the same four women. 40% of the Ashkenazi Jews. Roughly 80% are descended from the same seven men. You got that right, if you got it, if you understood it. Basically, only 11 Jews are responsible for a significant majority of the world's Ashkenazi Jews who are living today. 11 people, 8 of whom were from the Middle East. Remember that is just Ashkenazi Jews, or Jews whose families settled in Central, Eastern, or Northern Europe after being exiled from their homes in the land of Israel. After, not before, after being exiled from their homes in the land of Israel. What about Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews, whose families wound up in the Iberian Peninsula and in the Middle East, of course? And here in the Americas, where you and I live, they were the first here. What does our DNA have to say about that? Well, Sephardic and Mizrahi are a little more genetically diverse than Ashkenazi Jews, who are mostly all descended from the same few people, 11. Even so, it turns out that most Jewish communities are all distinctly related. Distinctly related. It matters not if the families ended up in Yemen or Georgia or Poland or Iraq. When I say Georgia, I mean the country or the state. Most Jews share a genetic connection that stretches back over several millennia, originating exactly where we all expect. Right in the Middle East, right where Israel is. Most Jewish communities, no matter where they are in the world, are more genetically similar to one another than they are to their non-Jewish neighbors. That's a fact. This means we are different in the most basic, fundamental way. To illustrate this, a Jew from Georgia, again, the country or the state, I don't care, you could take your pick. These Jews are more genetically in common with an Iraqi Jew, of which there are not many left, than with the non-Jewish family who has been living next door to them for generations. But the connections go even deeper. Many of us know this. We all know folks with the last name of Cohen, which turns out to be much more than just a last name for many of them. It is actually a tribal name. It's a group within the larger Jewish people. During the time of the Holy Temple, and we just read about it today in Shabbat Parah, as well as in the main Tzav, in the main parasha, the main Torah reading. During the time of the Holy Temple and in our modern synagogue, it needed someone to run it. These things don't run by themselves. In English, we call them priests. In Hebrew, Kohanim. The status passes down from the father to the son to this day. I know in many egalitarians, they say no, also to women. But that was never intended, and I'm going to show you why. The status has to pass from the father to the son to this day for biological reasons. The first Kohen was Moshe's brother, Aharon. The Jewish communities from Germany to Tunisia and beyond, wherever, they all have Kohanim. We have Kohanim in our own congregation. Does any one of them with the last name of Cohen really descend from Aaron? Because the status is supposed to pass from the father to the son, it's very easy to trace genetically through something called a Y chromosome. That's the Y with a letter Y, not WHY. But only men have the Y chromosome. A woman does not have it. So by looking at the Y chromosome of self-described Kohanim, guess what DNA found it? You got it. No matter where they are, wherever they're from on this entire planet, roughly 80% of men who identify as Kohanim have the same exact Y chromosome element that traces back to that same guy named Aharon who lived in the Middle East more than 3 millennia ago. Over 3,000 years ago. Amazing, right? But that's not all. There's more. Scientists were surprised to find that this same marker in another group existed. And this group is called the Lemba people of Zimbabwe. The Lemba people have always in their history have said they are ancestors of the Jews who fled the Middle East thousands of years ago. Both their traditional practices and their DNA backs up this claim. They maintain Jewish practices to this day. They keep kosher, they cover their heads with kippot, they pray in a mixture of Hebrew and Arabic, because that's what they speak. And their DNA tells the story of a people who originated in the same place in the Middle East where your and I DNA, when you and I would look at our DNA, it's the same, exactly the same place. Now, it doesn't stop there. The Lemba men share Middle Eastern DNA that I said that is not found in any other local population there where they live. And the priestly class, which are called the Buba, B-U-B-A, showed the exact same gene as other Kohanim, stretching back to the same common ancestors from over 3,000 years ago. Somebody who lives in New Jersey has the last name of Cohen, and is a Kohen, will share their same Y chromosome marker, the same one. Amazing. But here's the thing. Science is just starting to catch up to the stories that we Jews have been telling for thousands of years. My wife and I years ago got a DNA check just because we were curious. We didn't need to test it to confirm. We knew where we were from. But what we didn't know is we both come from the land of Israel, thousands of years ago. Kohanim did not need DNA tests to justify their claims of priesthood. The Lemda did not need a test to confirm their identity because they always knew it. Goes back and back and back. This is not how identity or family or peoplehood work, because those tiny invisible quirks hiding in our genetic makeup just strengthen the bonds that are there whether we know it or we don't know it. We Jews have been connected to one another for thousands of years, long before anyone even knew about DNA. And that, more than anything, is what it means to be a family. Most of what informs my opinion is my memory. I remember things of the past. Some of my memory as I get older isn't as good as it used to be. And sometimes I remember things clearly that never happened, but most of the time my memory still works good. But as a people, we are 4,000 years old. Our collective memory comes from more than just our brains. It comes from what we have shared as a people who started in the Middle East. We're deeply rooted in our DNA, so we share a collective Jewish memory that just may be the glue that holds us together as a people and maybe acts as a magnet for others. I agree the world hates us. Nobody can deny that. But why do we Jews stay Jews? Why? Why do we not run away? And I'm going to ask you to think about this. It might answer the question. How do you feel when you hear that a Jew won a Nobel or a similar international prize? How do you feel? And on the contrary, how do you feel when a person whose name is Madoff or Epstein or Weinstein did bad things? Does the Jewishness of these people affect your feelings at all? If you are like me and proud to hear a Jew winning a major international prize, and if you're embarrassed to the quick when we hear about a notorious Jew committing criminal acts, that is why, even with history's never-ending anti-Semitism, I choose to remain a Jew. And I think it's the same reason for you as well. And with that, I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and an Am Yisroel Chai.